Chapter 16. He wasn't going to keep everything a secret any longer, and he was going to tell Yvette everything. "You're just pretending, aren't you? Who are you to have dinner in modern restaurant?" Laura Jean was very happy. She was angry that she had sacrificed herself for nothing just now. But now, she was overjoyed to see Yvette Jordan despise Chuck Cannon. Did he really think that by picking up a few trashy dollars, he could forget the nature of being a poor man? He was just a loser. It was hilarious. Conrad Lee's face was contorted with a mixture of loath and joy. Still pretending? He won't be able to any longer now. "Chuck Cannon, you've disappointed me too much." Yvette shook her head with disgust in her eyes. She knew that he was working part-time at the agency, but was the money from his part-time job enough for him to come here to spend? He was definitely lying to her. What's more, he was talking so big about spending money. In his world of lies, he really would not have any success in his life. Yvette was truly disappointed. It was the right decision to stop him from sleeping in her own bed. "Well, guess what? You've also let me down." Chuck shook his head. She was just like a docile woman, speaking softly to Ballard in such a sweet and soft tone, even begging Ballard to come meet her. However, towards himself, her attitude was so different, just like the difference between heaven and earth. She was always disappointed in him, like a vengeful woman always coming after him. If Yvette knew that the two people she faced with two different attitudes were actually him, what would she think? Chuck suddenly did not want to argue anymore. "You're disappointed with me? You are not qualified to say that. If you say you are here for dinner, where is the message for the VIP room reservation? Show me your proof," Yvette retorted coldly. "I don't have any proof." Chuck shook his head. "Have you ever been to a high-end place? This kind of place needs to be reserved, but you don't have to. You have the privilege, because you are a waiter here." Laura did not miss any chance to ridicule him. "That's right, it is a privilege for you since a waiter just comes in and clean the VIP room. At least, you can come in and go out at will. Unlike us, we have to make troublesome arrangements just to reserve a seat to eat here. Chuck definitely has it much easier. You can just come in with a dirty rag. Once you take off your clothes, you can pretend to be eating here. Just so simple. I envy you." Conrad mocked. "Teacher, he used his identity as a waiter here to simply call girls over, and even pretended to spend money here as a customer. I only came because I felt he was pitiful, but who knew he was a person like this?" "Teacher, let's go. Ignore such trash," Laura said to Yvette arrogantly. Yvette was deeply displeased. "You don't even have a reservation text message. How can you be so self-righteous? You lie so naturally without even thinking it through. Remember, when you lie next time, check it out first. There is no seat without a reservation. Do your research more, then your lies will sound more legitimate." After saying that, Yvette turned away and left. Laura scowled at Chuck and pulled Conrad outside by his arms. But precisely then, a tall and beautiful woman walked in confidently. Her red lips parted to reveal a cool, unfazed voice. "Miss, who said that there is no seat here without a reservation? Who are you?" Yvette frowned. She did not know this woman, but the woman's temperament told her that she was not simple. "Hello, my name is Zelda Main," the beautiful woman said. "Zelda Main? Are you the owner of this restaurant?" Yvette was surprised. She usually invited people for dinner here. How could she not know this? But what was she doing here? "Yes," Zelda nodded. "Miss, our restaurant's VIP guests don't need to book. There will be seats for them anytime." "Well, I know that." Yvette nodded. Laura couldn't help sneering. Did the manager just say that Chuck is a VIP here? How could it be possible? She had never been here to spend money, but she also knew what conditions she needed to become the VIP of a restaurant. First of all, the expenditure must reach their standard. For a restaurant of this level, it would cost at least $300,000 to be a VIP. Chuck had always been poor. It was only recently that his luck took a turn and he managed to pick up some money, but it was only $20,000. Even if he spent all of it, he was still far from the standards of the restaurant's VIP guests. How could it be? She looked down on Chuck even more. Seriously, even if he asked other employees to cooperate with his acting, he had to do some research on his own too. Laura felt that the word VIP now had a derogatory meaning. Hearing the laughter, Zelda glanced at Laura and asked gently, "Were you going to complain about our employees just now?" "That's right, it's me. It's so nice being a waiter here." Laura sneered. A waiter actually managed to make other employees cooperate with him to lie to us, even saying something like he was just here to eat. Yvette looked at Chuck disappointingly. "So you think this gentleman in front of you is a waiter here?" Zelda asked calmly. "Of course." Look at his cheap clothes. He doesn't look like a customer who can spend half a day here. He is definitely a waiter. As a boss, I think you should severely punish staffs with this kind of behavior. He should be fired immediately. Laura's voice toned down, full of the pleasure of revenge. Sorry, I can't do that. Zelda shook her head. As a boss, you still want to side with your employees in front of your customers? Well, the way modern restaurant deals with this really shows its customers some things. Isn't the customer always right? Now employees are godly correct instead? Haha, so rare. Laura snickered. First of all, you are not our customer, Zelda retorted calmly. Why do you say I'm not a customer here? Laura was angry. Secondly, he's not an employee here, but a VIP in our restaurant. That's why I can't fire him. Zelda glanced at Chuck as she spoke. Chuck was a little surprised. Yvette's expression changed, a hint of astonishment appearing on her pretty face. She couldn't help but gawk at Chuck, and she was even more surprised by him. It was because she suddenly realized that Chuck was so calm. If he encountered such a situation previously, he would have panicked and tried to look for help from others pleadingly. But today was different. It seemed that he had changed. He was weirdly confident. What was going on? Laura widened her eyes and tried to cover up her shock. Do you think I will believe it? People like him, a VIP of your restaurant? Do you really think I don't know the standards for VIPs in your restaurant? If you don't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, you would never get the title of VIP. If he is your VIP, then your restaurant is not as high-end as I thought, maybe even low-end. Because if a garbage like this can become a VIP of this restaurant, it means that you've abandoned the word high-end. Conrad chuckled slyly. She's just adding oil to the fire. Why didn't she fire Chuck earlier? What's there to pretend? You're right, the VIP room needs a large sum of money, but this gentleman is my friend. As my friend, can't he be a VIP? Zelda's expression did not change, and her tone was still so indifferent. Conrad was surprised that Chuck was Zelda's friend. After all, his father was an interior designer who did many high-end restaurants such as the one owned by Zelda. How could such a person think that Chuck was a friend? Conrad found it incredibly impossible. Yvette was surprised. She didn't expect his words were true. He really came here for dinner. Was she jumping into conclusions? She examined Chuck once again, her eyes scanning his expression carefully. For some unknown reason, she felt that he has suddenly changed. The confidence that he had was something she had never seen before. Chuck was changing? Friends? Laura frowned and glanced at Chuck. You know such a friend? Look at his cheap clothes. Don't you think it is a disgrace to know such a person? I don't think so. Zelda glanced at Laura. Laura was so angry that she clenched her teeth in frustration. How could it be possible? She didn't even know such a rich person, so how would Chuck know her? Laura was envious. After all, Zelda's politeness to Chuck was obviously genuine. He really knew such a rich person. Laura was going crazy. So this gentleman is a VIP, he doesn't need a booking. How can I fire a VIP? Zelda looked at Yvette, but her sentence was actually directed towards Laura. Laura's face turned red. She felt so embarrassed today. Yvette was silent. Well then, how do you two know each other? Chapter 17. She felt so embarrassed today. Yvette was silent. Well then, how do you two know each other? Hearing Yvette Jordan's question, Zelda Main rolled her eyes and looked at Chuck Cannon calmly. She found he was a little nervous and puzzled. Why was he nervous? He was driving a car worth more than $2 million. Did he still want to keep a low profile? Despite knowing, she helped him cover up. I can't answer that. Anyway, this gentleman is a nice person. I will definitely make friends with him. Chuck heaved a sigh of relief. Yvette glanced at Chuck inadvertently. She had known him for many years, but she had never felt he was good. However, his calmness today really surprised Yvette. Maybe he was really changing. Why didn't you take notice of this gentleman? Zelda asked curiously. Yvette shook her head and walked out without saying a word. Zelda thought of something and immediately called out, Miss, my staff said that you've been waiting for someone for a long time. You'd better ask him if he'll come. It's not a good idea to continue waiting like this. Yvette stopped and said, I'll wait. After that, she went out. Laura Jean and Conrad Lee were confused. Who was their teacher waiting for? Yvette sat down again and took out her mobile phone. Seeing that Baller hadn't replied to her message on WeChat, her face darkened. She just wanted to treat him to a meal to thank him. Why didn't he show up? Why aren't you replying to me? Zelda shook her head slightly. She could tell that Yvette dressed up deliberately. Was it a date? Did the man skip the appointment? She rolled her eyes and suddenly noticed that Chuck was acting weirdly, his eyes glued to the leaving figure of the woman just now. Was the lady just now waiting for him? Zelda raised an eyebrow at Chuck questioningly. Chuck coughed and his expression returned to normal. Zelda's lips twitched as she realized the truth. She was really waiting for him, but why didn't he go to meet her then? Do you have anything else to say? Zelda asked Lara Jean. Is he really your friend? Lara asked cautiously. How did Chuck manage to befriend someone so amazing? She was really envious. Yes, Zelda said seriously. Chuck felt strange. He was really surprised that Zelda would come in, even going as far as to defend him. After all, the two of them had only met when he parked the car. Their meeting could only be classified a fleeting moment. They couldn't possibly be friends like this. Since I'm his friend, can you give me a VIP title? Lara asked expectantly. If she had a VIP title from Modern Restaurant, IR would be so glorious for her at university. You are his friend? Zelda asked sarcastically. You are his friend, yet you sneered at him just now? It's not sarcasm at all if it's true. I mean, look at his clothes. You can tell that he's a waiter. Lara was dissatisfied. Waiter? Zelda was amused at Lara's absurd logic. A man driving a car of more than $2 million was a waiter? What was this woman thinking? Although he is not a waiter here, he could also be a waiter somewhere else too. He is just lucky to have met a friend like you, otherwise, how can he have a VIP title here? Lara continued to pick on Chuck mercilessly. Miss, do you know that he drives? Zelda couldn't bear to listen any longer and started to say. She stopped suddenly when Chuck rushed over and signaled for her to stop. He drives what? Lara asked disdainfully. Zelda shook her head and said it's nothing. Lara continued to beg shamelessly. Can't you give me a VIP title? No, Zelda refused at once. Don't pretend. Since you can give VIP titles to people like him, why can't you give it to me? I won't come to your restaurant again. What's so great about it? Lara snorted in annoyance and dragged Conrad out of the room. Zelda's eyes knitted strongly as her tone suddenly dropped. What did you say? I said that since a person like him has a VIP title, why can't I have it? Aren't I 100 times better than him? Lara was stubborn. Your mouth is 100 times fouler than his, isn't it? Zelda said. You? Lara was angry. Was she trying to say she had a foul mouth? Oh, I know. Don't tell me. You are actually Chuck's mistress, aren't you? That's why you've been helping him all this while. He is your gigolo boy. No wonder a loser boy like him has a VIP title. Turns out you two are lovers, but don't you feel that you rich bastard have bad taste? Lara said scornfully. Once he heard her words, Conrad knew she shouldn't have said that. After all, she was speaking to the owner of Modern Restaurant. Conrad secretly nudged Lara. Stop pulling me. Lara said condescendingly. I must be right. That's enough, Lara, Chuck said coldly. He didn't want to pay attention to her just now, but she actually had the audacity to mess with the boss. Slap. Zelda raised her hand and slapped Lara. Why are you such a *ch? Chuck was stunned. This woman was really fierce. Lara had been spoiled since she was a child, and had never been beaten before, what more to be slapped? The pain she felt on her face induced a sense of shame within her and she cried out wrongfully. Why did you hit me? Because you're a *ch. Zelda's look was as cold as an ice queen. For a moment, her demeanor as a boss had crushed Lara's self-pity and sense of superiority to the ground. Conrad, did you see that? She hit me. Come on, hit her. Lara took Conrad's hand and pouted. Lara, let's go. Conrad tried to pull Lara away. His father's small company was counting on such big bosses like Zelda. He would never have the guts to offend her. What do you mean, go? Didn't you see your poor girlfriend being slapped? Why are you so timid? Help me get back at her. Lara was so furious that she threw a temper at Conrad. Are you leaving or not? Conrad glared at Lara. No. Lara sat down directly in an effort to make Conrad stay. Who asked you to be so bitchy? She is a big boss. How dare you talk about her like that? Do you want to ruin your father's business? Be careful. She will definitely take her revenge on you, Conrad said cruelly. I am not leaving. Okay, I will go if you don't. Conrad loosened his grip and walked out after apologizing to Zelda. He didn't want to offend her. If this went on, his father's company would be jeopardized if Zelda had her eyes on him. Lara was dumbfounded. She did not expect Conrad to really leave. The great sense of shame caused Lara to burst into tears. Conrad, you are a good-for-nothing. Break up, break up. After clearing her head, Lara stood up and also realized that Conrad's words were reasonable. The boss of Modern Restaurant must be wealthy. She must have millions in assets, and Laura's family could not afford to provoke her. What if she spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to find someone to deal with her? After all, she had heard of such news before. The more she thought about it, the more scared she became. Tears rolled down her cheeks and she cried out to Zelda, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure you're looking for hell. Zelda's eyes were as cold as the depths of Antarctica, and they stared deep into Laura's soul. This was the type of gaze that was full of the power of someone who had survived in the cruel business world, which made Laura cry even harder. I'm sorry, I was a *ch just now. Everything was my fault, please don't come after me. Seeing Zelda's cold expression, Laura came over to plead with Chuck. Chuck, you are her friend. Can you speak up for me? I know I was wrong, I really am sorry. Chuck wanted nothing to do with this. After all, Zelda was such a powerful boss with both a fearful temper and a limited fuse. Laura was already lucky that Zelda didn't take out her phone to call someone. Chuck, say something. After all, I'm your classmate. Please help me. Laura tugged on Chuck's sleeve. You are just taking revenge on me. You could just say a word, but you are not. Laura started to make a scene. Chuck had no choice but to ignore her. He had already met Yvette and his purpose was achieved. He could pay the bill and go back. He said, thank you, Director Main. Call me Zelda. Zelda's expression softened. This is inappropriate, isn't it? Chuck hurriedly shook his head. She was a boss with status, so it was definitely not appropriate to call her directly. He could only ask, why don't I call you Sister Zelda? That's fine. Zelda smiled. Laura saw it and hurried over. I'm sorry, Director Main, I'm sorry. Zelda's expression immediately darkened. If she had followed her previous temper, Laura would have already been sent to the hospital. How dare she say this to her? If her father heard this, Laura would be much more miserable. Chuck, please put in a good word for me, okay? Laura grabbed Chuck's hand, but he just shook his head. This was not something he could have a say in. He just wanted to laugh. How could he help? As Zelda's expression continued to darken like rain clouds, Laura's heart sank. She gritted her teeth and begged, Chuck, why are you such a jerk? Do you really want me to beg you with tears? Well, if you put in a good word for me, I'll leave with you tonight. Is this enough? Chapter 18. Well, if you put in a good word for me, I'll leave with you tonight. Is this enough? Chuck Cannon was surprised by Laura Jean's words. She had always been dismissive of him. The only reason Laura had agreed to lend money to Chuck was because she had made an agreement with him for him to pay her back double if he couldn't pay up on time. Despite it being an extremely ruthless deal, the truth was without this condition, she would never have agreed to lend Chuck Cannon any money even if he begged her to. Was it not possible for Laura, who looked down on him, to say something like that? Chuck looked at Laura doubtfully. Laura was also anxious and even felt ashamed. Laura was already furious that Conrad Lee had left her alone. She suddenly found out that her boyfriend was a wimp, not even willing to stand up for his girlfriend when she is hurt. Compared to Chuck, Conrad was as timid as a mouse. Just like this, Laura suddenly found that if Chuck could know such a boss like Zelda Main, he probably had hidden talent. In addition, she was really scared now, so she really needed Chuck to put in a good word for her to Zelda. Moreover, when she seduced Chuck just now, he had seen most of her body. So Laura gave an excuse that she was reluctantly giving him some benefit. Zelda rolled her beautiful eyes and smiled. Say something. Laura's face was burning with shame. She thought Chuck was doing it on purpose. What type of men wouldn't gobble a pretty lady if offered to them willingly? She knew it well. The reason why he didn't speak to her was to embarrass her. Did he want to make her say it more straightforwardly? The more Laura thought about it, the angrier she became. I will have sex with you, do you understand? As long as you can put in a good word for me, my body is yours to play with tonight. Chuck wanted to laugh just now. He never thought Laura would say such sexually explicit words, to offend to have sex with him so that he could put in a good word for her. The main point was that Zelda was extremely mad at the moment and Chuck didn't actually know her for long. Maybe Zelda would do him a favor and let her off the hook, but this would break the newly made friendship between the two. They would probably become less acquainted and slowly become strangers, and it just wasn't worth it. Chuck shook his head helplessly. You can talk about it yourself. I can't help you. Laura was angry. You are really a loser. Go to hell. Laura was furious and at the same time fearful towards Zelda, pleading to her in a small, timid voice, Director Main, I really know I was wrong. I won't say that again. Chuck felt helpless upon seeing Laura's teary-eyed face. After all, he had borrowed money from her last time. Although it was over the top, she had temporarily solved his meal problems. It was better to say a few words. Chuck started, "Sister Zelda, you don't have to say anything else. Since you have already spoken, let's forget about it this time." Zelda said, "Thank you, Director Main." Laura was so surprised that she almost cried. She was relieved. If a rich person like Zelda decided to keep a watch on her, she might not be able to live out her university life peacefully. "You should thank him, not me," said Zelda coldly. Laura looked towards Chuck and gaped in awkwardness. She thought that he wouldn't have said anything for her, but he actually did. It was complicated for her, as she felt both ashamed of herself and surprised. She whispered, thank you. I'll call you later." Laura ran out with a red face. Chuck, on the other hand, hoped that he would never receive her call. Zelda smiled, "I still don't know your name." "Chuck Cannon." "Chuck Cannon?" Zelda was surprised. She had never heard of such name, which meant that he wasn't in the upper class that she knew. Who were Chuck's parents? She was curious. "Then I'll just call you by your name in the future," Zelda announced after a brief moment. "Sure." The two of them then added each other on WeChat. Zelda's beautiful eyes twinkled as she changed the topic. "Wasn't that beautiful woman waiting for you?" Chuck nodded. He had already noticed that this clever woman had seen through him. "Then why don't you go meet her?" Zelda asked curiously. "It's complicated." Chuck sighed. He didn't want to say that Yvette was his child bride. "Well, I need to go now. Enjoy yourself." Chuck nodded. He was also ready to pay the bill, so the two of them came out together. Chuck saw that Yvette Jordan, who was well dressed, was still waiting. He had no choice but to go outside. When they were paying the bill at the counter, Zelda offered to treat Chuck to a meal. However, Chuck shook his head and declined her offer politely. He said that it was not right for her to treat him to a meal when they had just known each other. After all, this was Zelda's business. Chuck surprised Zelda even further by his polite speech and nice attitude. Who were his parents? He was young and knew how to handle affairs. In the future, he was bound to have greater achievements. She was thinking whether she should invite him to the party the day after tomorrow. "Let's wait and see," Zelda thought. "Sister Zelda, I'll go back first then," Chuck said. "Okay." Chuck walked out. Zelda glanced at Yvette, who was in a daze. Then, she beckoned the staff to come over and ordered the staff to make a steak in the kitchen. Soon, the staff came over with the cooked steak. Zelda took it and placed it in front of Yvette. Yvette came to her senses, shook her head and said, "I haven't ordered anything yet." "Someone treated you," Zelda said. "A treat? Could it be?" Yvette was pleasantly surprised. "He's here?" She looked around and did not see the person she had imagined. She asked, "Where is this person?" "You've seen him in the VIP room just now." Yvette was stunned. So this was a treat from Chuck? Where did he get so much money? This cost more than $800. Is he using a credit card? Yvette asked carefully. "A credit card? He doesn't need a credit card." Yvette understood. She did not know how or why Chuck befriended Zelda. Since they were friends, how could Laura charge him for this steak? "Really?" Laura shook her head. Apart from making Yvette feel a little surprised today, she didn't think that Chuck was not as simple as she had thought. He has always been simple. "Yes." Zelda nodded and turned to leave. Yvette was silent. She lowered her head and just continued staring at the steak, not attempting to take a bite out of it. She was determined to wait for the baller today. However, this restaurant was about to close at 10 o'clock, so she had no choice but to pay the bill and leave disappointedly. She drove back without eating anything. After she went back, she stared at her prettily dressed up self in the mirror and felt wronged. She took out her mobile phone and stared at her WeChat. After a brief hesitation, she decided to have a video call with the baller. She clicked call, but the other party immediately refused. Yvette was slightly taken aback. At least the baller was still there, but why was he always ignoring her? The baller had transferred $200,000 a few days ago, but now he was ignoring her again. The huge difference made her anxious. Did she do something wrong? Yvette pondered silently. After thinking about it for a long time, she sent a message on WeChat. "Baller, did I do something wrong? Ellipsis. Chuck had already driven back and was staring at Yvette's WeChat message on the sofa, thinking of what to reply. What should he say? After thinking for a long time, he could only reply, "You did nothing wrong. I just don't want to see anyone today." Yvette immediately replied, "All right, let's talk about it tomorrow." Yvette was a little surprised to see his message since he was replying to her. She lay on the bed and started imagining, what would this generous man who was willing to give her $200,000 look like? Chuck did not reply and put down his phone. He was just about to bath and go to bed when his mobile phone rang. He looked at it and was wide-eyed. Why was Laura still calling him? Did she still want to trick him? Chuck didn't pick it up and let it ring on its own. But after a minute, Laura called again. Chuck could only pick it up. What do you want? Chuck, I don't owe others a favor. I said that I will sleep with you today, so I will sleep with you. Come out and get a room. I don't mind. Laura was conflicted for a few hours, but eventually, she still called him. She did not want him to look down upon her. She had to do what she said. There's no need, Chuck quickly replied. He had better not provoke someone like Laura. Chuck, stop pretending. I remember when I bent down in the classroom last time, I saw you looking at my chest. How dare you say you don't want to sleep with me? Laura was angry, but before she could finish her sentence, Chuck hung up the phone. Laura was so mad that she called him again. Instead, she found that she had been blacklisted by Chuck. She scolded furiously. What a loser, not even taking up the chance graciously although I offered. You deserve to use your hands for the rest of your life. I did what I said, but it's you who didn't accept the offer. Don't blame me, Laura muttered angrily, and then walked into the girls' dormitory. She was feeling a little strange regarding this. Why was Chuck acting differently now?